The real vampires could not give a damn about fictional stereotypes. For a very long time, vampires were as common in Greece as in Romania. And although they scared Greeks out of their minds, they were quite able to walk about in full Greek sunlight. As any Greek could tell you, the only time vampires were compelled to remain in their coffins was between the hours of Vespers on Saturday and the end of the liturgy on the Sunday morning. Typically, what matters in real vampire country is not a physical environment, but a sacred one. For similar reasons, a key cause of vampirism in Greece was excommunication. Modern vampire fans would probably not recognize a real vampire. The real vampires looked like ordinary shabby dead peasants. Far from being stylishly gaunt and chiseled, they were often downright fat. Some are styles of one British revenant from manic being of frightful corpulence, whilst Greek vampires could be round like a full sack with skin stretched like the parchment of a drum. This was again due to corpse gases, though what mattered most to terrified onlookers was the impression that the body was failing to decompose. Far from pale, such corpses might be dark blue or black, again due to the chemistry of death. In countries where vampires did drink blood, a corpse with reddened skin was especially horrifying, as this indeed indicated that it was feeding on the living. The vampire comes to tuck you into bed. Every night when you go to sleep, you are temporarily paralyzed to stop you acting out your dreams. Usually, you know nothing about this. But those who wake into a kind of in-between state can find themselves terrified of being both motionless and speechless. That is sleep paralysis. Next, enter the nightmare. As you lie there helpless, something is coming slowly from the corner of your room towards you. It can take various shapes, but it is terrifying beyond all description. It gets on the bed, onto your chest. A feeling of tremendous weight and suffocation may now overwhelm you, sometimes combined with the sense that this demon is sucking the life from you. The vampire scares people to death. In winter 1731 the village of Medvejan on the Morava River was convulsed by an epic vampire panic, centered on the death of Arnold Pale 5 years before. Had you stumbled into Medveja at the right moment, you could have seen, and smelled, 11 decapitated corpses blazing into the winter sky. During these events, at least 2 people died of fear. A young woman named Stadaka lay down to sleep 15 days ago, fresh and healthy, but at midnight she started up out of her sleep with a terrible cry, fearful and trembling, and complained that she had been throttled by the son of a hay duck by the name of Milo, who had died 9 weeks earlier. She then experienced a great pain in the chest and became worse hour by hour, until finally she died on the 3rd day. Vampire poltergeists. Given how terrifying sleep paralysis nightmares can be to modern rationalists, we can understand the wild hysteria they provoked in vampire country. In such circumstances, vampire attacks were as good an explanation as any for an utterly bewildering phenomenon. By contrast with, for example, modern America, back there you told everyone about the nocturnal assaults, and got plenty of support. Unfortunately, because everyone soon knew of the vampire, a kind of electric terror snaked through the village, and soon more people were having nightmares, and everyone hearing of those, and so, when the undead were simply not dead. The intensity of vampire terror is nowhere more grimly clear than in those cases where the supposedly dead had actually been buried alive. This was a serious risk throughout history, as we have seen in the case of those disinterred corpses found to have gnawed their own arms. The problem was worse in much of vampire country, because of the belief that you must bury a corpse while it was still warm. And if a dead person did suddenly rise up out of coma, matters got much, much nastier. Vampires are much older than you think. We have good reason to believe that revenants are as old as fear itself. Take, for example, the vampire skeleton found in Mikulovice, in the Czech Republic, in summer 2008. In a 4,000-year-old grave in East Bohemia, archaeologists discovered that the man's body had been weighed down with 2 large stones, one on the chest, and one on the head. Head and heart have been classic locations for the seat of the soul throughout history, and the soul was the chief culprit in most vampire panics. In other cases you simply did everything you could to stop the revenant getting out. In summer 2012, for example, Bulgarian archaeologists digging in the Black Sea town of Sozopol found 2 medieval skeletons pierced through the chest with iron rods. Surprising vampire solutions. They hoped that an upside-down vampire could not wriggle itself over hints at another forgotten truth: the real vampires were not evil aristocratic masterminds with chilling plans for world dominance. Frankly, they were pretty dim. Mercy McDermott explains that in Bulgaria one could get rid of a vampire by approaching him with a warm loaf and inviting him to go to some distant place on the pretext of a fair or a wedding, and then abandoning him there. Alternatively, one could send him to get fish from the Danube, where he would fall in and be drowned. She and Paul Barber add that numerous seeds, including millet, mustard and poppy, might be strewn along the path to the grave, as well as left in the grave itself. Perhaps suffering an early form of OCD, the vampire must count all these, and so is too busy to get to your bed and scare you to death. Count Dracula indeed. You could inherit vampirism. We owe many vampire treasures to two British Army officers, St. Clair and Brophy, who stayed for some time in the Bulgarian village of Duraku in the 1860s. They tell of how, one year, their young local servant Theodore, as the son of a noted vampire, was doing penance during this present Lent by neither smoking, nor drinking wine or spirits, in order to expiate the sins of his father, in order to prevent himself inheriting the propensity. Interestingly, Theodore's father was a vampire poltergeist, and so may well have been a genuine restless ghost. Falling in love with a Miss Tucheritza, Theodore found himself so suspect that he was forbidden by her parents to marry her. The Vampires of New England. You may have seen recently that President Trump wishes to promote the teaching of more patriotic history in U.S. schools. Here are just a few of the things that could unearth about New England through the 19th century. Thanks to Michael E. Bell, author of Food for the Dead, we know that a special kind of vampirism existed here. At a time when consumption ravaged the Northeast, claiming the lives of perhaps 13 members in just one family, the vampire was identified as scapegoat. One person died of consumption, and others soon fell sick. And so the first dead person was exhumed and inspected. Any sign of life at all, which might just remnants of heart or lungs, indicated that this vampire was feeding on living relatives from the grave. Accordingly, heart or lungs might be burned, and the ashes given to the sick to drink and water.